All right, good morning, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started. If you got questions, go ahead and post them. Should be below the video if you're on a smaller screen, to the right of the video if you are on a larger screen. All right, looks like we got some questions in there to start. So we will start here with David K. Says, good morning. I'm still not taking a divot. What is a good drill for keeping the lag longer? I think that is why I'm not taking a divot. I tend to pick the ball, not much margin of error and loss of potential power. So if you are not taking a divot, basically what's happening is that the bottom of your swing arc is occurring before the ball, right? Or at the ball, right? So if you imagine my fist is the golf ball and this hula hoop represents how the club is arcing down to the ball, the bottom of your swing arc is basically right where the ball is. If I'm hitting the ball this way, right, that's where it would be. Now it could be back here as well. Now, if we want to hit the ball solidly off the ground, then the bottom of this swing arc needs to be ahead of a few inches and slightly below the ball. It needs to be more like that, right? So if you're not taking a divot, lag does play a small role in that, but you can take a divot without having a ton of lag. So that's actually the last thing that I would go to work on hitting it more solid and taking a divot. The first thing that I would look at is your ball position, right? So generally what I'd like to see ball position wise is I'd like to see the ball just forward of the middle of the stance, right? So if I put this alignment stick down and this represents the middle of the stance, what I'd like to see is I'd like to see that ball, basically the back of the ball on that stick, right? So if I'm set up like this, I have this alignment stick equally between my heels here. That ball is going to go just forward of that stick. Basically, the back of the ball is resting on the stick. That's a good ball position for most people for shots that are off the ground. What I see a lot of people who struggle with thin shots is they have the ball position way up here. Remember, we need to get the bottom of the swing to be a few inches in front of the ball. If the ball is way up there, it's going to be very difficult for me to get the bottom of my swing forward, no matter how much lag or anything I have. So if we put it here, it makes it a lot easier, right? So just forward of the middle of the stance would be the ball position that I'd be trying to go for. And that's the first thing I would do. The next thing that I would look at is your weight shift, right? Are you getting your body forward? A lot of people who I see struggle with thin shots look like this at contact, where their body is very angled away, right? We talk about the compression line on the website. That's the line that goes from the lead ankle, lead hip, lead shoulder. At impact for an iron, for a shot that we're hitting off the ground, I like to see that pretty vertical to just maybe a degree or two angled away. Now for the driver, we can be very angled away because that promotes an upward angle of attack. That's what we want with the driver because the ball is up on a tee. We can hit up on it. The bottom of the swing arc, we want that to be before the ball. But for a shot that we're hitting off the ground, we need to have it in front. So we want to have that more forward. So getting a good weight shift forward would be a big part of that. So that's probably the number one technical thing that I see is just people are like this at impact. They're on their back foot. They're hanging back. We need to get the body forward. You need to visualize the bottom of that swing arc being more ahead of the golf ball. As far as drills for that, one thing that I often see is people sliding their hips away. So they're like this at the top of the swing. If you're like this at the top of the swing, you're going to tend to be like this when you come to impact. So a good drill for that would be the chair drill. Take a chair, put it outside your hip like this, right? And then make swings where you create a little bit of space between your hip and the chair at the top of the swing. And that gets your momentum and everything moving forward. So that would be one. Now, let's say you do have, you're not sliding your hips away in the backswing. Well, then the step drill would be what I would recommend doing, because if you're not getting to your lead side, it's because you're just not pushing and shifting to your lead side. So the step drill is a really good one for that. For the step drill, we start with our feet together. We start this club going back. As the club goes back, we step forward, right? And then that's going to get your momentum and everything coming forward. So doing the step drill, doing that with no ball, and then trying to replicate that same feeling in a practice swing where we're getting that momentum going to the lead side and really visualizing hitting the ground in front of the ball would be a really good one. So those are all main things that I would say would be those are the two main ones, the ball position and just not getting the body forward enough at impact. Another one that's less common and one that I would look at before you would look at lag would be, are you shallowing out the club too much? At Toss Golf, we talk about shallowing out the club, but you can overdo it. If you overdo the shallowing, you swing the club too much from the inside, right? So if I'm here, right, imagine I have this ball here. It's a little forward to the middle of my stance, and I swing 45 degrees out to the right. It's going to be very, very difficult to get my club to bottom out in front of the ball. In fact, it's probably going to bottom out more in front of my trail foot. Just like on the other side of that, if I come over the top and steep, right, this is a big reason why a lot of people come over the top and steep, is because they're not shifting their weight, and it's the only way to get the bottom of their swing ahead of the ball or anywhere near the ball. So they'll come over the top to do that. So, but if you come over the top, the club's going to bottom out more forward. So we don't want to come over the top. We don't want to swing too much from the inside. We want to get this club working down. Generally, when the club's parallel to the ground, you want to see that the butt end of the club pointing a little bit right of the target. That's generally a really good, that's perfect shallow position. That's going to allow you to have a fairly neutral arc to the ball. And it's going to allow you to not only have better ball flight, right, but it's going to allow you to more easily get that bottom of the swing arc more in front. So if you're looking on video and you see the clubs really far behind you at this point, the swing is too shallow, I would try to feel like you're kind of swinging over the top a little bit. Obviously, it's not the reality, not technically what you want to do, but that's a feel that you want to feel like the club's kind of coming a little bit more over the top. And if you overdo it, you can always tone it down. So those would all be the main things. Now, keep in mind, even if you're casting the club, if you do all those things that are much, much easier to change, you'll be able to take divots, right? I was a caster for a lot of my life. I played college golf casting the club and having a little flip at impact. But I had no issue taking divots, and that's because I got a good weight shift forward. I didn't over shallow out the club. So lag is not the reason why you're not taking divots. It's more because of the other things that I talked about. Now, if you want to work on lag, right, there's usually two main reasons why people cast the club. It's either because the face is open or because you're coming down steep and you're standing up to shallow it. You have to release the club when you stand up to shallow it. So the 20-minute shallowing fix will be, what you want to work on there. And then the top speed golf system. I'm telling you, if you just look at your ball position, you look at your weight shift, more than likely that's going to fix it. If you're swinging too much from the inside, that's going to fix it. Those are the things that they're going to, if those things are in order, you will be able to take a divot. All right, let's keep it going. So Glenn S says, hi Q, what is the best drill to ingrain clearing the left hip before the downswing? Well, you wouldn't want to clear the hip before the downswing. You clear the hip through impact. That's when you're clearing the hip. Most people don't need to do a drill to clear the hip. Most people need to incentivize themselves to actually turn their hips through. So you got to make sure that you're shallowing out the club. So the 20-minute shallowing fix would probably be the best drill for you to do to get the body opening up. You have to, the more you more you shallow out the club, the more you can open up, right? So for example, let's say you're struggling, you're coming into contact and you're like this, right? Your hips are pretty much square to the ball. Well, if you were to clear your hips with the current way that you're bringing down the club, so let's say at this point in the swing, you're like this. Well, now let's say your hips are rotated. Look where the club goes. It comes down steep, right? So if I want to get my hips clearing, I need to have that club more shallow and more behind me. So that's why the 20-minute shallowing fix is probably the number one thing you can do if you want to work on getting the body to open up, because if you don't have the club shallow, you will have no incentive to open up the body and clear the hips. You will have no incentive at all, because if you were to do that, you would hit terrible shots. The main reason why people do not open up their body is because they're doing so to be able to hit a functional shot. If they don't do it, then they'll hit a worse shot. I will tell you, I would much rather have the person, the golfer, that has this club coming down like this and then doesn't clear their hips, than to have the golfer that comes down like this and clears that. Because the golfer that's coming down like this, where this club is, you could say it's in the slot, right? with his clubs in a good position to come down to the ball, that golfer is going to be able to hit functional golf shots. But the golfer who has this club out here like this and is rotating like their lower body, like a tour player, they're going to hit really bad shots. If they're even able to make good contact with the ball, they're going to hit pulls, they're going to hit slices, they're going to hit pull hooks. They're going to have a hard time getting the ball to go in the direction of the target. So that's why I say you got to shallow out the club. If you want the best drill, it's going to be shallowing out the club. So Paul C says, I have a bad habit of cupping my wrist at the top of the swing. I also cup it bad after impact. Any solution to this? Yeah, stronger grip. If you cup your wrist, then you should use a stronger grip, because a stronger grip makes it to where you can get away with some cupping in the wrist, right? Because it's going to get the club face in a better position. So now you can still over cup the wrist if you happen to have a stronger grip, right? To get the face too open. So if that is the case, if you're cupping the wrist so much that the face is still open, even with a stronger grip, there are lots of training aids out there that you can use. The old one, is where you take your glove and you put some T's in your glove. If you cup your wrist, the T's are going to go into your arm. So just taking some slow swings where you're focusing on keeping those T's out of your arm. Start out slow. Start out with shorter and slower swings, and then go from there. So use something that's going to give you some feedback. But like I said, there's lots of training aids out there that you can use that basically do the same thing. That's just kind of like a MacGyver version of it. But yeah, if you just take some T's or a T, put it in your glove to where the pointy side is kind of pointed down toward your wrist. And if you bend your wrist, right, that cupping is going to stab your wrist. So it's going to give you feedback right away. So it kind of forces you to keep your wrist in that position. So just start out with some shorter, slower swings, and then build up from there. Willis says, I play a lot of softball and a lot of golf. Are the two swings basically the same except for golf angle down and at a still ball, or do you think some bad habits can creep in from softball swings and affect my golf swing negatively? So I don't know the ins and outs of the softball swing, so I don't know necessarily. But I will say that the main difference between a golf swing and a baseball swing is that you don't have to square up the bat, right? The bat is round, so you don't have to square it up. It's going to be the same no matter what angle you have it at, right? If I take a bat and I twist it like this, it's going to be the same no matter how much I twist it, right? If I take a golf club, it's going to be very, very different, right? That's an open face, that's a closed face. So that's really kind of the main difference. But a lot of the movements are very, very similar. Diane C says, is there any way to replay yesterday's office hours? Yes, if you go to the the instruction tab, then go to office hours highlights. So you go instruction tab, office hours highlights. If you scroll down to the office hours highlights page, you will find the archived office hours. So it's a playlist where you can find all of the last so many office hours. So you can go in there and play yesterday's office hours. All right, so Mike G says, can you talk about the drills to help ingrain the correct dynamic of the shoulders in the downswing? I have been told at the start of the downswing, the left shoulder should feel like it should point downward toward the target line. I am having trouble executing and feeling if it is in fact correct feel. So a good one you can do is just take a club and put it across your shoulders, right? And you can go to the top of the swing, and then you start your downswing, right? You're going to shift into your lead side with your shoulder down, and then you're going to come through, right? So again, I'm going to be here. I'm going to have my shoulders angled down a little bit. I'm going to start down. It's not really angled down toward the target line. It's not angled down that much. That'd be a lot of side bend. Most people just aren't going to be capable of doing that, and nor is it necessary to do that. Typically, that butt end of the club is going to be pointing at the top of the swing. It's going to be pointing 4 to 8 feet outside of the target line, somewhere in that area, right? So I'm here, I'm going to shift into my lead side, and then I'm going to come through. That'd be a good drill that you can do. And then you just try to replicate that same thing with a club in your hand. All right, keep the questions coming. So Steve C says, how do you get a ball out of the rough? What club should be used? Should the downswing path be more steep? Excuse me. So really, if it's a normal lie in the rough, like if you're not going to have any trouble getting the club on the ball, they're really, you do the same thing out of the rough as you do out of the fairway, right? But if the club's like really down in the grass, it's like deep, right? You may need to make some adjustments. You may not necessarily need to take a different club depending. So if you have a long iron, let's say you're 200 yards out and that's your 5-iron, right? And you're in deep rough. Well, you're probably not going to be able to hit a 5-iron because it's just not going to have enough loft on it to get it up out of there. You're probably going to need to take your medicine and take like a, I don't know, like a 7, 8. It really just depends on the lie. And part of being able to assess a lie is you got to learn by experience. Unfortunately, there isn't anything I can tell you in here that's just going to make you an expert at, assessing a lie and knowing what you need to do out of it. It comes from learning by doing, basically experience. So, but yeah, that's what I would recommend doing is, in that kind of situation, you're probably going to have a hard time getting a 5-iron on the ball if it's like a really deep, thick, like U.S. Open style rough. If you watch the U.S. Open, you probably saw a lot of players, hitting wedges out of there, basically laying up because they know they had no chance of getting on the green. So, and those are the best players in the world, right? We can't expect us to, mere mortals to be able to do that. So, yeah. And then if you are in deep rough, putting the ball more back in your stance to allow for a more downward angle of attack in the ball would be something that can be helpful as well. And that's only if you're in a situation where the ball is just, engulfed by the grass, right? Where you can barely see the top of the ball or something like that. If it's not really thick, rough, most of us, I think, are playing in pretty normal, rough conditions. I know that the rough at, our courses here, it's not, it's just, it's really not that, it's really not that big of a deal. You just hit the same shot. But if you get into some really thick stuff, yeah, you may want to take more loft. You're going to want to put the ball more back in your stance. So that way you can hit more steeply on it and pop it out. But what I would recommend doing to really get good at this, what I would recommend doing is go practice it. Go learn, go try to put yourself, I know at the range, they don't have like a deep rough where you can practice this, but next time you go play, if you're just kind of playing around and, more like a practice round, throw a couple balls in the deep rough and hit a few shots out of there just to see how it comes out. Put it back in your stance. Try to see if you can hit a 5-iron, out of it. Of course, if you can, if you have enough space to be able to do that. But that's really what I would recommend doing. Try to go out and learn by doing. All right, how do you get rid of the chipping yips? So chipping yips, in my experience, typically comes from just poor setup and technique. Because what ends up happening, where the yips come from, is basically you're over the ball and you just feel like no matter what happens, right, it's going to be a bad result, right? So usually, if you have the chipping yips, it's because you're either going to chunk it or you're going to blade it, and it's because your technique and your setup just isn't very correct, right? So a lot of times when I see people have the chipping yips, they'll have the hands way forward like this, and the ball will be way back in the stance. Well, this can cause chipping yips. You can certainly hit great chip shots from this position, but you have very, very little margin for error, right? Basically, you better be having that club come down and clipping that ball perfectly. Otherwise, it's going to be a chunk or a blade, right? If I'm not coming in and doing this perfectly, right, I'm either going to get too much of the ball, right, for the ground. I'm going to hit kind of the equator of the ball, or I'm going to come in and I'm going to get this club hitting the ground a little bit before the ball. Well, if that happens and you have the hands way forward like that with a wedge, the leading edge of this club is sharp, so it's going to dig, right? I mean, I've seen lots of players who, get set up in this kind of position. They come down and they hit so much of the ground that they hit the ball like 2 inches. You barely hit the ball. Well, that's because the club dug into the grass so much. So what we want to do is have a technique to where we have a huge margin for error. So that way, when if we do hit a little bit behind the ball, right, and we want to be able to swing with the intention of hitting the ground, because if we don't hit the ground, then that's going to lead to a blade typically, right? So we want to hit the ground, and if we hit the ground, we want to have a large margin for error, right? So you do that with your setup in your technique. So like I said, we want to do things that don't make the club dig into the ground. So having so one thing would be, if you don't need to use a wedge, then I wouldn't use a wedge, right? Because a wedge has a sharp leading edge on it. It's going to tend to dig more, right? So having, if you are set up to hit like an 8-iron, then hit an 8-iron, right? But if you need to hit a wedge, hit a wedge. But that would be one way to kind of help with it as well. But other things would be coming in more shallow, right? So coming in more level with the turf, right? So if I have the ball back here, that's going to be more of a downward angle into the ball. That's going to be chopping down. That's going to be digging, right? If I have the ball more in the middle of the stance, that allows me to come in much more level, right? If I have the shaft leaning way forward, that's getting the leading edge down into the ground, right? If I have the shaft more straight up and down or just slightly forward, right, that's going to engage the bounce of the club, right? So the bounce is this hunk of metal right here that's on the back of the club. We want this hunk of metal to be contacting the ground. We don't want this sharp leading edge contacting the ground. If we can get the hunk of metal, the bounce, to be contacting the ground, then the club will glide on the turf, right? So if we have the ball position that's more in the middle, and we have a shaft angle that's more kind of straight up and down or just slightly angle forward, right, then that's going to allow you to engage the bounce and come in more shallow, and it's going to lead to more gliding on the turf. I can hit the ground back here 2-3 inches behind the ball and still have a fine shot, right? The other thing would be standing this club up a little bit. So getting the toe down a little bit. The reason why that helps is that if I have this club flush to the ground, like I normally would, for a normal shot, I would want this club flush to the ground. But for a chip, right, I don't need it like that. I can have the toe down a little bit. So the reason why that helps is that if I have this club flush to the ground, I have to have this entire club underneath the ball. But if I have this toe down a little bit, then I only need to have this part underneath the ball. And it makes it a little bit easier. It makes it less, it's going to be less likely to dig if you do that. So if you just make those adjustments, right, in your setup, you're more than likely, that in and of itself is more than likely just going to get rid of your yips, right? So again, ball position more in the middle, shaft more straight up and down, and then having the toe down a little bit. And when you do toe down a little bit, you are going to play it slightly off the toe. And then as far as your technique is concerned, what we want to focus on is kind of moving the chest, right? So imagine this club is kind of connected to my chest. That's how I want it to kind of come through. Now, obviously, our arms are going to lift a little bit. There can be a little bit of hinge, but a lot of people who struggle with chipping are just kind of all hands and wrists. And when I do that, look what happens when I do that. I'm lifting the clubs up, and I'm going to drop it down. Remember, if I'm coming down, the club's working down into the ground too much, it's going to tend to want to dig. So I want to use my chest more to kind of turn my chest back and through. So unlock your knees and your hips here and allow your chest to kind of turn back and through. And I'm telling you, if you do this technique, you will never have the chipping hips because you can hit the ground, anywhere near the golf ball, and you're going to get a nice clipped chip shot, and off of, any kind of lie, off of a bare lie, you won't be afraid of any kind of lie, right? If you use this proper technique. So bring it back, turn the chest back and through, brush the turf. I'm telling you, if you do that, you will not have the chipping yips. All right, let's see if we got any more new questions. All right, so nothing new yet. So if you got new questions, post them in there. Oop, got one. So CC, should you have a full swing when playing a long bunker shot? Yeah, it's most likely going to be a full swing. You need to have some speed because the sand offers resistance, right? And you're hitting the sand. So you're not going to be hitting the ball with all of the speed that you're giving, that you're putting into the club head. The sand is going to eat up a lot of that speed. So as far as how big of a swing or how much speed you're going to use, it's really just going to depend on how long the bunker shot is. Here's what I would recommend as far as bunker shots are concerned. What I would do is I'd take your highest lofted wedge, right? For most people, that's going to be like a 58 or a 60 degree, something like that. And I would hit, a full blast greenside bunker shot and just see how far that goes. And then, so that way you have an idea, okay, I have a, 20-yard bunker shot here. That's my max with this club. So I know I got to go full on, right? Well, now let's say you got a 15-yard, bunker shot, and then your max with that club is 20 yards. Well, it's not going to be a full out max. You can take a little bit off of it, right? So that's kind of where I would do. And then also, let's say you have a 25-yard bunker shot, and then that's out of reach for your 20-yard max with the lob wedge. So in that case, I would go to your next lowest lofted club, right? So for most people, that's going to be like a 54 or 56. And then you'll see how far you hit that club, right? So that way you always have an idea for how, what club you need to use in certain situations. So Paul says, I saw one of your office hours where you were explaining putting a rod in the ground in the same plane of the club. You said put the rod 6 inches out, 2, 3, 4 feet back. I'm swinging the club and not hitting the rod, but not sure if I am too shallow. Does that make sense? Yeah. So your ball flight will tell you if you're too shallow, right? So if you're, if the ball is hooking too much or you're blocking it out to the right, if it's not a draw that starts just at the target and, or just right at the target and draws back toward the target, you're probably shallowing it too much, right? So your ball flight's going to tell you whether you're shallowing it too much. And also, if you're shallowing it too much, you're going to tend to start to hit thin or chunk it because remember from what I talked about earlier, if you shallow it too much, the club's going to bottom out more in front of your trail foot. And if that happens, you're going to tend to chunk it or thin it. So your ball flight will tip in your contact. Well, a lot of times will tell you. But a good way to check on video to see if you're shallowing it too much is to use something called the elbow plane line. And keep in mind, this is only accurate if you have the correct camera angle. So be diligent about how you're setting up the camera. So here's how you set up the camera. Put a club or alignment stick on the ground. Point it out at a target on the distance or in your net or whatever, right? Then you're going to take your camera and you're going to set that up as if there's a laser coming out of that camera, and you're going to set it up shooting right down that club or alignment stick. Then when you go to set up to the ball, you're going to have your toes up there close to it, right? So let's say this is my club I'm putting down. I got my camera lined up with this. I'm going to set up here, and I'm going to have my toes up here close to it, within a couple inches of it. You generally don't want to put your toes right on it because then you'll kind of move it around. But if you put your toes like an inch or two away from it, that'll still be fine, right? So get this set up. That you want to make sure you're set up down the toe line. You want to make sure that the camera is at about hip level here. And then you want to be far away enough to where you and the club stay in the frame. If you do those 3 things, you will have a good downline camera angle. You will have an accurate elbow plane line. Now, when you video your swing, you would use an app or software What we use is called OnForm. That's what I recommend. I love the OnForm app. That's what we use for our online lessons. It's got drawing tools in there. If you do unlimited swing reviews, then basically you get to use it for free. But they do have a free trial. I think you can still use it for free even after the free trial, but you have a much more limited amount of videos. But I think if you want to get more videos that you can record on there, I think it's like $5 a month. Right. So OnForm, it's available for Android and Apple devices. So check it out if you want to look at your swing on video. Basically, what you do is you record your swing using the app, and then you draw a line from the ball up to the middle of your elbow. And what you would want to see is you'd want to see that club tracking down just underneath that line all the way down, just underneath the line with an iron. For a driver, it's going to be about a club head underneath the line all the way down until it gets to the ball. So, about a club head underneath. But an iron is going to be just underneath it all the way down. That's going to tell you if you're shallowing it or not. If it's working down above that line, so imagine, the line is like right here and the club's kind of working down like this, that would be steep, right? So that's what that drill is all about. It's forcing you basically to get underneath. It's basically making an elbow plane line, and it's forcing you to get underneath it. So Gene H says, when I look at my swing on video, I seem to have a nice enough shoulder turn, yet my wrists don't cock at the top. When I watch good golfers at my club, they all seem to cock their wrists to set up at the top of the parallel. Should I force a wrist cock? So first thing I would look at is your grip. I'd make sure that you're holding the grip in a way that allows you to basically get the club to lag a little bit. So imagine if I held it kind of in the palm of my hand like this, right? When I bring it up to the top, I can't really cock it up very much, right? So I want to have the club going a little bit through my fingers and a little bit through my hand like this. So you can see it's this crease between my pointer finger, and it connects to my palm of my hand here. I'm going to be above that, and I'm going to be below the same thing on my pinky, right? And I wrap my hands around there. Now, when I go up the top, I can actually create that cock in the wrist, right? So that's the first thing I would look at. The next thing I would look at is your wrist may not be physically capable of creating that wrist cock. Everyone's made up differently. So what creates the wrist cock is what's called radial deviation, right? So that's where the thumb goes up, right? So I'm pointing my thumb up toward me. Most people have about 20 degrees. You may have 0 or less than 0. You may not be able to do that, right? And if you can't, then you're just physically not capable of doing it. You can only do what you're physically capable of doing. So those would be the things I'd look at. 1, I'd look at your grip. 2, I'd look at, are you physically capable of cocking your wrist up, right? And then if you are, then yeah, I would try to get your wrist to cock at the top, because that's going to be a good power source. In the top speed lag section, there's a video where we go thumbs up, thumbs down. That could be a good one for you. Now, one thing I would say is when you do the thumbs up, it's important to not cup your wrist a bunch, right? So you don't want to cock your wrist by virtue of cupping your wrist a lot. Now, if you cup your wrist, you can cock your wrist more, but the problem is when you do that, that opens up the club face, and you don't want to open up the club face. That's going to lead to way more issues than what you want. So I would check out the Top Speed Lag course, click the instruction tab, then click the Top Speed Golf System, then go to the Top Speed Lag course. There's a drill in there. I think it's in level 2, I think, that's called thumbs up, thumbs down. That would more than likely be a really good one for you to work on. So Mike G says, following up on shoulder dynamic question from earlier, from face-on view, my head tends to rotate open towards target too soon at impact, as opposed to letting the right shoulder rotate under the chin through impact. Any drills to set up improvement to feel the right shoulder under the chin through impact? That's not an essential part of the swing. You can go ahead and let your head rotate through. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. Not something I would worry about whatsoever. So no drill to do that because it is not something you need to worry about. There's lots and lots of videos. Go look at Annika Sorenstam. Go look at David Duval. At impact, they look like this. 100% fine. That's not an issue. How does John Rahm hit it so far with such a short swing? So there's a couple things to unpack there. So one would be that John Rahm, it does look like John Rahm has a short swing, but it's really relative to his peers, right? Because most tour players have a much longer swing than John Rahm does. So that's definitely part of it. I think a lot of people feel like he has such a short swing, but I look out on driving ranges, and see a lot of recreational golfers that have much shorter swings than that, right? So that's a little bit part of it is just the stigma that he has this really short swing when it's really not that short. When you look at John Rahm, he actually has a 90-degree turn. He's basically right here. This is kind of where he stops, right? Most tour players are more like this, right? Where he kind of gets to that 90-degree turn and he just kind of stops there and he doesn't lift his arms quite as much as some other players do. But he still gets a really good turn, right? He still gets his body really coiled up and really turn. Now, if John Rahm short swing looked like this, right, where he didn't really turn his hips or turn his body, he wouldn't probably hit the ball very far at all, right? But he still gets a good 90-degree turn. So that would be kind of the main thing is to make sure that you're getting a good 90-degree turn there. The other thing is that John Rahm, he's a big guy. He's not a. I think he's 6'2" something like that. I could be wrong, 6'1", 6'2". But he's a big guy. He's a big, strong guy. If you're big and strong, it makes it a lot easier to hit the ball farther. So that's definitely part of it as well. And he's also been swinging that way for a long time, and he's trained himself to swing fast doing it that way. And that's through something that's called neural adaptation. So basically what that means is that he's taken a lot of swings over his lifetime where he's been trying to swing hard and his body has adapted to that. His neurological system has been trained to work and move a lot faster, right? I mean, it's like baseball pitchers, right? Baseball pitchers, they don't just start, they just don't throw fast right away. That they train their neurological system over a long period of time to do that, and that's exactly what John Rahm has done as well. So this is something that we talk about in the 20-minute distance fix, which I'll talk about here in a minute. But that's definitely something that you want to do in order to increase your speed. So it's basically like creating, taking, maybe right now you're like a, Volkswagen Bug engine, and then you want to train yourself until you're like a Porsche engine, right? To get that's basically what you're doing. It's the same size of a vehicle, right? The Porsche engine isn't really any bigger. I mean, I'm not a big car guy, but just by looking at Volkswagen Bug versus a Porsche sports car, right? The engines can't be that much of a difference in size, but one is way more powerful than the other, right? So that's kind of what neural adaptation is it's creating a neurological system that just fires a lot faster. So that's a big part of it. And the other thing to keep in mind as well is that if John Rahm did take a longer backswing, did turn more, did lift his arms more, he could absolutely hit the ball farther. I've actually seen video of him doing that. Another player that people say has a short swing is Tony Finau. I've seen Tony Finau take a swing where his arms are way up here, right? And he swung over 130 miles an hour when he's normally at like 120 some miles an hour. So keep in mind that if these players that have short swings, right, did take bigger turns and longer swings, they would absolutely hit the ball farther. So that's why when some people say, "Oh, I'm doing the John Rahm thing, short swing," but the reality is that we're not John we're not John Rahm, right? If we want to hit the ball farther, we need to do certain things to help us to do that. So and the biggest thing that you can do is to get a bigger turn. So work on getting a bigger turn, unlocking your hips, unlocking your shoulders. That's really the number one thing you can do to get speed. We have these distance clinics that we have when the weather's nicer here in Florida. It's a little bit too hot at this time, but here soon we're going to start doing some distance clinics. So if you're interested in that, be sure to be on the lookout in your email. But the first thing that we do in these distance clinics is we work on getting a bigger turn, and it's by far the number one thing that everyone does to create more speed, right? So that's what I would recommend doing. And that's the first drill that we do in the 20-minute distance fix. So if you're looking to gain more distance, I wouldn't recommend trying to do the short swing John Rahm thing. What I'd recommend doing is working on getting the biggest turn that you can get, right? And that's going to be the most conducive for you to get club head speed. And then work on, your neural adaptation. And basically what that is just swinging with 100% effort on these swings. Now, keep in mind that these swings are not the swings you're going to use on the golf course, but they're swings that are going to train your neurological system to swing faster, so you can do the same thing that you can basically create a lot of speed in a small package, right? So that's what I would recommend doing. Work through the 20-minute distance fix, work through doing the neural adaptation, use the ground correctly. That's another thing that John Rahm does really well, is he really pushes into the ground. If you watch slow motion swings of him, he really pushes into the ground hard. You watch with his lead foot as he's coming through, he's pushing hard with that lead foot. That's something we work on in the 20-minute distance fix. So yeah, if you want to gain distance, I recommend doing the 20-minute distance fix. It's included with your membership. If you're an all access member, all you have to do is click the instruction tab at the top and then click the 20-minute distance fix. And if you do that, you follow the drills, you're going to gain some distance for sure. Any good drills to stop standing up and flipping through impact? Yeah, so basically, typically, if you're standing up and flipping through impact, there's typically two things. One of two or both of these things are going on, right? Either you're coming down steep, right? So this would be coming down steep. And in order to get this club rerouted and shallowed out, what a lot of people will do is they'll stand up. You can see when I stand up, look what happens to the club. Now that club's working from the inside, and I can get the ball to go toward the target. If I were to stay in my posture and rotate through the shot with this club coming down steep, well, that is just going to make the club come down more steeply. I'm going to have a really hard time hitting good golf shots from there, right? When you come down steep and across the ball, your contact is typically going to be very poor. And if you do happen to make good contact, it's going to be a pull, hook, slice, something like that, right? So what a lot of people will do in an effort to be able to hit a shot more toward the target is they'll stand up. Now that gets the club shallowing out. And now there I can actually more than likely make some decent contact, be able to get the ball to go toward the target. Now, is that the ideal way to do it? No, but it is a solution to the problem of coming down steep, right? And when I stand up, right, I have to flip the club to get the club to the ball, right? Because if I stand up and then I have a lot of shaft land, well, the club's not going to get down to the ball. It's not, it's not going to get down there. So that's the first reason. The second reason is the club face is open, right? So a good way to kind of look at this is if you pause the swing when the club is parallel to the ground in the downswing, look at where the club face is. Is the club face pointing up in any way at all? If it is, then that face is open. And I have to find a way to square that face up. And what a lot of people will do to square it up is they will release the club. So that's one thing we want to understand, is that release closes the face, right? So if I do that, that's going to close the face. If I lag the club and I have my hands more in front, that's going to open the face, right? So I need to have the face in a position that's more closed, that's going to allow me to keep my hands in front of the ball at impact and still have the face square, right? Because if I were to come down, let's say I'm coming down and this face is pointing up to the sky, and then I stay in my posture, I get my hands in front, that face is going to be wide open. For a right-handed golfer, you're going to hit the ball a mile to the right. So again, this is just flipping, early releasing the club is just a solution to that problem, right? It's a solution to get that face squared up. Again, I would much rather have the golfer that has this face open and stands up and flips it than to have the golfer that has his face open, stays in their posture, gets tons of shaft lean, because that golfer is going to hit the ball way to the right. They're more than likely not going to make good contact with the ball. So again, the standing up and flipping, these are solutions to problems that you have in your swing to be able to hit a functional shot. And if you didn't do them, you wouldn't hit functional shots, right? So what we need to do is we need to get you in a position coming down to where you are incentivized to stay in your posture. You're incentivized to get your hands in front, because if you didn't, then you would hit a bad shot, right? So what you'd want to do is you'd want to get this club more shallowed out in the start of the downswing, right? If I were to have this club shallowed out and now stand up out of it, now the club's too shallow, right? The club's too shallow, I'm going to hit bad shots, right? I'm more than likely going to hit chunk or thin, right? Because I'm swinging too much from the inside. And even if I do have to make a contact, it's going to be a block, a hook, or a block slice. It's going to be poor ball flight as well if I make solid contact. So if I have this club shut out, now I'm incentivized to stay in my posture and rotate, because if I do that, that kind of neutralizes that club path and gets it coming down to the ball in a much better way, right? Same thing goes if I have this club face closed. If I have this club face more angled down toward the ground, a little bit, right? If I were to come into contact and stand up and flip, well, my club face will be very, very close at impact. I'm going to hit everything way, way to the left. So if I have this club face more angled down, now I'm incentivized to get my hands in front at impact, because that's going to allow me to have a square face at impact. So if you're someone who stands up and flips, the first thing that I would recommend doing is working through the 20-minute shallowing fix, because it addresses both of those issues that I talked about. It addresses getting that club shallow, and it addresses getting that club face more closed, right? So if you struggle with standing up and flipping, I highly recommend the 20-minute shallowing fix, because that's going to get you on your way to being able to stay in your posture more easily and to be able to get more shaft lean at impact. All right. So if you want to check out the 20-minute shallowing fix, just click the instruction tab at the top, then go to the 20-minute shallowing fix from there. I just can't seem to hit the ball solid. What drills should I do? So first, I would identify what exactly isn't solid. Because if you're not hitting the ball solid, one of two things is happening. You're either not hitting it in the center of the face, you're hitting it heel or toe or something like that, or you're hitting the ground before the ball, right? So what we need to do is kind of evaluate what's going on there. So to check your strikes on the face, what you can do is you can use some foot fire spray it on the club face, and see where you are striking it on the face. Another way you can do it is using something called the dot method. You take a ball, you take like a dry erase marker. The best ones I found for this are like the Expo dry erase markers. Get like a black or a blue one. Fill up a dimple on the ball. Then you situate that ball to where the back of the ball is going to rub off on the face when you hit it. And then a little dot will be on the ball. You can use like a Sharpie too, but it's a little bit harder to wash off of your face when you do that. The dry erase markers will just wipe right off with a wet cloth. So that's what I'd recommend doing, is just kind of see, because most likely what you're going to find is you probably have some sort of tendency, right? A tendency to hit the ball on the heel, a tendency to hit the ball on the toe. Now, if that is the case, the first thing that you can do if you have a tendency is to just try to exaggerate the opposite of that tendency, right? So for example, let's say your tendency is to hit the ball off the toe a lot. then what I would do is I exaggerate trying to hit the ball on the heel, right? Change your intention. Right now, your intention is to hit the ball in the center, but the reality is that it's on the toe. So if you change your intention to hitting the ball off the heel, hopefully the reality will be more in the center of the face. So that would be kind of the first thing that I would check out. The next thing I would check out is, let's say you're hitting the ball in the center of the face, or it's just thin or low on the face. I would check your ground contact to see where you're hitting the ground in relationship to the ball. Right? If you're looking down at the face and there's no contact mark at all, then obviously you're hitting the ground before the ball. Right? So there's that part of it as well. So if that is the case, then what I would do is if you're on a normal like a normal turf, what you can do is if this is your ball, you can place a tee in the ground right next to your ball, and then I would come down and hit the ball, and I'd see where your divot is in relationship to that ball. Right? If it's back here, then bingo, that's the reason why you're struggling with good contact, is because you're chunking it, right? And let's say there's no ground contact at all. Well, again, the bottom of your swing arc isn't forward enough, right? So we need to get the bottom of the swing arc a little bit forward and more in front of the ball. So working on getting a good weight shift to the lead side. I would also look at your ball position. Ball position, we want to have the ball position just forward of the middle of the stance. I find a lot of people who struggle with poor contact have the ball position just way too far forward, right? That makes it very difficult to get the bottom of your swing to be in front of the ball, right? We need the bottom of the swing arc to be in front of the ball and slightly below the ball to be able to make solid contact with the ground. Now, there's one major thing here from the top-speed golf system that tends to lead to poor contact, and that's our stable fluid spine. So from a technical standpoint, that's what that'd be kind of the main thing that I'd be looking at, is your stable fluid spine. So in the top-speed golf system, we talk about how we want to have our spine slightly angled away from the target address. An easy way to get into this position would be just take the club from your chin down through your belt buckle, hold it up against your body, get in your posture here, and then tilt this club, right? Keep it up against your body, tilt this club until it just barely touches the inside of your leg. That right there, that's going to put you in the perfect angled away position at address. If we're setting up like this, right, where our body's kind of angled toward, then it's going to tend to lead to poor contact, right? Because it just puts you in a bad position at the top, because it opens up your shoulders. You're going to tend to come over the top and fall back, and it just makes it difficult to be good, right? So we want to get that nice angled away position, and then at the top of the swing, right, we want to have a nice angled away position at the top without really swaying our hips or our head too much in either direction, right? So basically what's going to happen is I'm going to shift into my trail side, and my hips going to go back and around. My hips are going to stay fairly centered as I get up to the top. My head, right, may move slightly away from the ball and down, but generally it's going to stay fairly steady. So if you look at your swing, right, and you see your hips are going this way, right, or if you see your head's going that way, or your head's going too much this way, right? If you're looking like this at the top of the swing, that's going to be difficult. If you're looking like this at the top of the swing, that's going to be difficult. If you're doing this maybe your head's not moving, but your hips are sliding way away. Again, that's going to be very, very difficult to make solid contact. So these are all things that you work through in the stable fluid spine course in the top-speed golf system. So what we want, again, is we want to have a little tilt away. We want to remain in that tilt, stay nice and centered as we get to the top. And then as we come down, right, the hips are going to move forward while the head stays back. So that's going to get you more in that angled away position. As you're coming in, you're going to be more like this. Now I'm going to be more angled away as I come in, right? So the head can move forward a little bit, right? But it's when it moves forward too much or it hangs back too much, that's going to be an issue, right? So really a lot of poor contact can be fixed by improving your stable fluid spine, right? We want to be slightly angled away at address, remain slightly angled away as we come to the top, and then be a little bit more angled away as we come into contact. If I can do that and I'm not excessively moving my head one way or another, and excessively, now your head can move. Don't get caught up with the head has to be dead still. The head moves around, right? But it's when it's excessive, the head's attached to the spine. So when it's excessive, right, that means that your spine is doing things that it shouldn't be doing, right? That's what's making the head move around everywhere, or your hips again, your hips are connected to your spine, so your hips are doing things that they shouldn't be. That's typically what I see is the hips just slide away too much or something like that. So the stable fluid spine course has, you work through level 1, you work through level 2, you work through level 3. That's going to get your spine in a position. Clay calls it the number one key to consistency in the golf swing, and that's really what it comes down to. Is because if that is out of order, it's going to be very difficult to make solid contact with the ball consistently. So that's where that comes down to. And if you work through that course, that's going to help you to make more solid contact. But again, I would look at where your solid contact is. Is it because of poor strikes on the face? And if it is, make an adjustment based on what you find with your feedback. Is it because of poor ground contact, right? If it is, then, look at your ball position, make sure you're getting a good weight shift to your lead side. And then from a technical standpoint, I've been working through the stable fluid spine. Again, you can find the stable fluid spine by clicking the instruction tab at the top, then go to the top speed golf system. That's the first course there in the top speed golf system. Select that and you can get started on those drills. How do you hit the ball higher with your irons? All right, so there's really two ways you can hit the ball higher. One would be with more loft, right? So if I want to hit the ball higher, right, I would maybe hit a pitching wedge instead of an 8-iron, right? But actually, just a second here. Not sure if I read that correctly. Yeah. How do you hit the ball higher with your irons? So, like I said, there's two ways that you can hit the ball higher with your irons. One is with more loft, and two is with more speed, right? So, the more loft one is going to be difficult for most people because most people are already probably coming in with too much loft. So, if you come into contact and you're like this, you have a ton of shaft lean, and you want to hit the ball higher, then easing up on the amount of shaft lean will help you to hit the ball higher. So, if you're a lower club head speed player, maybe your driver club head speed's like 80, 85, it's going to be very difficult for you to have shaft lean that's like this because you're just not giving the ball enough energy to get high up in the air. It may not be the most playable ball flight, right? So, in that situation, we just want to have a little bit less shaft lean. We still want shaft lean. We still want to have the hands ahead of the ball at impact. We just don't want to necessarily have Dustin Johnson like shaft lean, right? So if you want to hit the ball higher and you have a lot of shaft lean, right, then standing a little bit taller, letting that club release, adding a little bit of loft will help you hit the ball higher. It may help you to hold a little bit more green. So that'd be the first thing. But I'd say a lot of people probably aren't going to fall into that. I don't see a lot of players that have too much shaft lean. What I see most of the time is players that typically don't have enough shaft lean, but also don't have enough speed, right? So if I don't have a lot of club head speed, then it's going to be hard for me to get the ball to climb up in the air, right? So think about it this way. Let's say two balls are launched at the same angle, right? But one has a lot more speed than the other, right? So let's say this ball is launched at 120 mile an hour ball speed, right? And it's launched at, let's say this is a 25-degree angle, right? Well, it's going to climb in the air, and then it's going to eventually reach its peak, and then it's going to fall down, right? Well, let's say I hit another ball, but it's at 150 ball speed, right? The same 25-degree angle. But what's going to happen is because it has more energy, it's going to keep climbing up in the air. And now the top of the apex is going to be more in this area, right? So that allows you to hit the ball higher, not only higher, but farther as well, because I'm going to hit it. It's going to keep on going up in the air, right? So what most people need to do to be able to hit the ball higher is they need to gain more club head speed, right? Because that's really what's going to help you to hit the ball higher the most. That's the best way to get the ball to go higher is with club head speed. And it's for those two reasons I talk about. One, it's going to make you hit the ball higher. Two, you're going to hit the ball a lot farther. And I got to tell you, it's so much easier to play golf when you hit the ball farther, right? I think most people would agree with that, right? So hitting the ball higher and farther with more club head speed is the number one thing you can do. So the best way to do that is to work through our 20-minute distance fix. Our 20-minute distance fix is all about gaining club head speed. Now, the course is done with a driver, but you will gain a trickle-down effect with your other clubs. So it's not like you work through the 20-minute distance fix just with your driver, and the driver is the only thing that goes up. Everything's going to go up, right? You're all through the bag with a full swing. Everything's going to go up. So you don't need to work through it individually with every club. You just work through it with your driver, and you're going to get the dividends from your other club as well. So if you're looking to hit the ball higher, I would highly recommend working through that 20-minute distance fix, because that's going to allow you to gain club head speed, hit the ball higher and farther. The other thing you can do is look at your equipment. If you're playing blades, right, and you're trying to hit the ball higher, blades are generally a low launch kind of club. So blades may not be the best kind of equipment for you, right? You want to have clubs that have a little bit more, more of a cavity back, maybe even more weight underneath. You may even want to incorporate more hybrids into your bag. I know a lot of people are replacing, their 5 and 6 irons with 5 and 6 hybrids because of those clubs, the way that they're shaped and their weighting and things like that. You're going to hit those clubs higher because there's more weight lower on the club that allows you to launch it higher. That's kind of the whole idea of a hybrid. Is it gives you that punch, but it also allows you to hit the ball higher, whereas like a fairway wood are generally going to go lower, right? So it allows it to go up higher. So that's what I would recommend doing, is maybe looking at your equipment as well. So again, just to recap, if you want to hit the ball higher, you're either going to need to do it with more loft, which most people that's not going to apply to, because they're already releasing the club probably a little bit too early to begin with. So you wouldn't want to release it even earlier. The very best thing that you can do is to gain more club head speed, because that's also going to help you to hit it farther. And there's no higher correlation to lowering your handicap than getting more club head speed, hitting it farther. So if you're interested in that, you can check out our 20-minute distance fix course. You can get to there by clicking the instruction tab, then the 20-minute distance fix from there. The last thing that I would look at is maybe your equipment. Like I said, if you're playing blades are generally a low ball flight kind of club. So if you want to hit the ball higher, I would get more cavity back, or even introduce more hybrids into your bag, because those are going to help you hit the ball higher. All right, we'll go ahead and wrap it up right there, unless we got any new questions. Nope, doesn't look like we have any new questions. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up right there. Thanks everybody for joining me. We will be back here tomorrow, Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to y'all next time.